I was basically feeling pregnant, and at the same time, this was like a manifestation. This was like a seed of something that I am holding for my future, whether my future baby is going to come from one of these eggs that I froze, or whether I'm gonna get pregnant naturally. I still planted a seed for my future through taking this action and navigating it the way I did. Welcome to Identity Evolution, the podcast where we explore the moments that shape who we become. I'm your host, Lorena Schuth, somatic self-concept and identity coach, and I'm here to guide you through the raw, real, and transformative stories of reinvention. From solo reflections to powerful interviews, this space is your invitation to evolve into who you've always wanted to be. So to kick us off for our episode today, I'm going to share a personal story. I wanted to open with something real and raw and personal. This is going to be unscripted. I did make some notes, but they're very rough notes, and I'm just really going to let it flow. And this episode is really going to be about why I froze my eggs, which is something that I did fairly recently. And it's a decision that I had been battling with for so long, whether I should do it, whether I shouldn't. And I wanted to share today from the lens of identity, faith, dealing with emotions, the nervous system, what that experience was like, why I did it, how I feel in the aftermath of it, what it did to my self-concept, how my self-concept has shifted through this process, and also the identity, the embodiment that I held throughout to make this experience as a little bit less bothersome. Let's put it that way. So it's probably going to be a bit of a different lens on egg freezing from what you may have seen if you've ever watched any videos or listened to any podcasts about it. I'm not really going to talk about the science behind it or, biology or fertility as a whole. This is going to be more of a mindset and embodiment and emotional integration and faith and fear focused episode or story. And if you are completely new to egg freezing, if you've never heard of this, if you're maybe not even interested in it, then I still encourage you to stay on and to listen to this episode, because there's a lot of lessons in here about faith and fear and identity. So if you are tuning in because you want to learn more about your self-concept and how you can evolve your self-concept, your identity, as the podcast name says, then this episode may still be for you, even if the topic itself isn't. So yeah, I recently froze my eggs, and really I have pretty much always had a strong desire to be a mother one day. In saying that, I didn't admit it to myself for a really long time. To be honest, in my 20s, I wasn't really sure whether I wanted to be a mom. I wasn't really sure whether I wanted kids, but then in my 30s, it became pretty evident that, pretty early on, to be honest, already in my late 20s, it became pretty evident that this was something that I felt a calling for. And when I look back, I have to say that calling was there the whole time. I just didn't really admit it to myself. Probably out of fear that it wasn't possible for me. And I think we can sometimes do that with our desires. We have a desire, and instead of just going all in and pursuing it, we kind of minimize it. I see this in my clients all the time as well, that they have a desire and they're almost ashamed to say what that desire is, because there's a small voice in your head that will just say, but what if it doesn't happen? We tend to prepare for disappointment before it even happens. And so this was something that I did as well. And I didn't do it consciously, but on an unconscious level, I definitely didn't even admit to myself that this was something that I wanted. But at some point, the desire just became louder and louder. And that is just the nature of desire. If you ignore it, it's just gonna come back. It's just gonna come through again. Okay, so this desire became stronger and stronger the older I got. And I'm a big believer in taking charge of your desire instead of waiting for something to happen. I believe no one ever has to settle. I truly believe that you can be whoever you want to be, even when your circumstances currently don't agree with where you're wanting to go. Circumstances can change, right? They can change. They can change. Any day could be a day that something happens and unfolds completely differently to you from how you're used to experiencing life. So the thing is, with this desire for motherhood that I had, I also have so many other desires, and it was really important for me to build my business, and I've got some other experiences that I want to have before I become a mom. But the reality is, I'm now in my mid-30s, and as much as I'm a big believer in anything is possible, and mid-30s, let me just say this as a disclaimer first, it's by no means old. Also from a fertility perspective, sometimes the medical system wants to tell us that, from 35 onwards, it's a geriatric pregnancy and, you're on the fertility cliff, everything is going downhill. I do not believe that. I very much believe that, as long as you haven't hit menopause, you're good. You can get pregnant as long as you ovulate. And so I don't see this from a fear-based perspective. But the fact is, I'm just not ready, right? And I don't know when I will be ready. Maybe next year I will be ready, but I've always seen myself as an older mom, and I just didn't want to have that pressure to feel like I need to hurry up. And so I had thought about freezing my eggs for this reason for a really long time. Obviously, it's not cheap. It's not something that you just do on a whim. And what held me back for a long time as well is that it's not a guarantee. So if you choose to freeze your eggs, so for those of you who are like, what even is this about? As a woman, as, someone with ovaries and a uterus, you have all the eggs that you will ever have from birth, from actually before birth. So you need to take really good care of those eggs, because when they're gone, they're gone. And then you don't have your own genes, your own eggs to, create an embryo and a baby from anymore. So given that you are born with all the eggs you will ever have, you have a limited time because every month you lose some of those eggs. Now, as I said, I'm not someone who lives in fear. I don't believe in that messaging. I know someone who got pregnant at 45. And it's not like you've reached your limit, especially not in your mid-30s by any means. But also we're all different, right? Some people have fertility issues in their 20s. Other people are still very much fine in their 40s. So there's not a one size fits all as with anything. But egg freezing is basically where you stimulate your ovaries, or with the clinic you go with, you stimulate your ovaries, and then you retrieve as many eggs as possible. That's a very basic way of putting it, through a surgical procedure. And then those eggs will be frozen, which is kind of cool that science can do this. It's kind of like, to me, it's kind of like science fiction. It feels like in a science fiction film where, somebody's put in cryo sleep to travel to another planet. It's kind of cool. That's kind of what freezing your eggs is really like, which it's so futuristic. It's so cool. So they're then on ice, and then they are the age. I'm 34 years old right now. So those eggs that I've frozen, they will be 34 years old forever. Until I use them or choose not to use them. That's insane. That's just crazy. So that quality is preserved even, when I age. which obviously I do every day. So that's really awesome. However, it's not a guarantee. And it's also a fairly expensive procedure. It's something that not everyone can do. I'm very lucky and privileged that I was able to invest in this, that I was able to do this. And I didn't hesitate. I think oftentimes we do hesitate. I hesitated to freeze my eggs, but I didn't hesitate because of the investment, because I think often we do hesitate for monetary reasons. But if you ask me, money is replaceable. Time you can't get back, right? So, and when it comes to fertility, it's time. When it comes to other things I want to achieve in my life, my time is precious, more precious than my money, if I'm honest. So that wasn't the barrier for me. The barrier for me was, number one, the success rates aren't as high as they tell you they are. I feel like sometimes clinics make it look a little better than it is. With those eggs I've frozen, and I'll get to the result at the end. I won't actually share numbers, but I'll tell you how I feel about the result and how I managed all of this emotionally. And, the identity and faith and fear pieces around that. But with the eggs that I've got frozen, it is very much possible that none of these eggs turns into a live birth into a baby. So this is not a guarantee. And also, it doesn't matter how many eggs you've got frozen. In theory, you only need one good quality one that actually works out, but you just don't know. You can't predict it. So you need trust. You need a trust in the process, which is something that I'm going to go into in a bit, or in this episode as well. So that held me back for a while. And then what also held me back was that it takes a huge toll on your body. My body is my temple. I work with the nervous system. I know how, our bodies are so strong and they can handle a lot, but do they have to? They're also precious and they're fragile, and we only have one. And I really didn't like the idea of pumping my body full of artificial hormones. In the end, I chose to do it because I believe that the results was worth the cost. Like, the payoff was good enough. But that's what made me doubt for a bit. But then let's talk about what made me actually do it. Because yes, I had this desire for motherhood. But what I really noticed the most was that last year, I went on a bit of a dating journey after a big heartbreak a few years back and healing from that. And I can talk about that in a different episode. And I also have two interviews actually lined up where some of my guests are talking about their heartbreak stories, which are so powerful. And heartbreak can be such an initiation for you to change your self-concept. It's so profound. And this heartbreak definitely shifted who I am radically, in a good way. So I'm very weirdly grateful for it, although it was very painful at the time. And then I really didn't date for a long time, intentionally. And now I'm in a completely different place in my love life again. But last year I went on a big dating journey. So I chose to consciously date, and I really, had some fun with it. I got back out there. But what I noticed as I would go on dates and I would meet some great people, and it was fun, it was good. I learned a lot about myself and what I wanted and how I related and my attachment patterns, because often you can't really see them if you're just, on your own, which I had to be for a while. But, I got to learn a lot more about myself. But what I also noticed was that I would date, and you date to connect to someone. Yes, you date to meet someone. If you have the desire for a romantic relationship, for something committed, for something real, you date to connect with someone. But I noticed that there was a subtle unconscious energy of, I wasn't just looking for a partner, I was also looking for a baby daddy. And that just didn't feel good to me. And I'm sure it also didn't feel good for the men I was meeting. Actually, I met a friend of mine for coffee this morning, and we were talking about this, and he said, men can tell. Men can tell when a woman comes on a date and she's like broody and she's just looking for him to tick the boxes and to become her baby daddy. And I believe that because energy doesn't lie. Like, I can kind of tell what people's intentions are most of the time, and I'm sure you've got like a bit of a psychic knowing as well. We all have intuition. We can sometimes read people really well. And I didn't want to go into dates with that energy. And so I was like, okay, what can I do about this, right? And then, as I said, I'd been thinking about it for a while. I'd been thinking about it for 2 or 3 years before actually doing it. And just all these things that held me back that I mentioned before were the reasons why I didn't do it. And I was like, time is going to pass anyway. I'm probably not going to regret doing this. I hope. I'll talk about that at the end as well. Let me just do it. And that was a big initiation into, let me just take that leap. And I started the process then. Well, I called the clinic in December 2024, but then I had some medical issues for other reasons. Anyways, it all took a while to actually properly start. And yeah, it's an intense topic, honestly. I've spoken to so many women, and also a lot of my clients have the desire to be a mother, and fertility can just be such an intense topic. In the self-concept and manifestation space, we talk a lot about releasing the timeline, right? If you do anything with pressure, if you do anything from a place of needing it fast, urgency, you're just going to create a huge resistance inside of you, and it's just not going to work. But when it comes to fertility, there's also this very real biological reality. And if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, by the way, please do leave a comment and let me know if you've ever felt pressure around timing when it comes to motherhood and relationships and any of these themes. And if you're listening elsewhere, by the way, you can send me a DM on Instagram. I'd honestly love to hear your thoughts and your experience. But because I did not want to make this decision out of fear, I promised myself I would only do this if the decision came from trust and not from fear. And I'm going to go deeper into this in the end as well, because the outcome taught me a lot about trust and fear as well. But any action that you take for your future, I'm a big believer in taking action. I'm really, I don't want to say against, but I'm very skeptical of I'm just trusting and surrendering crowd, because that can really keep you stuck. It can really keep you in waiting for something that will never happen. I think if you want something, you have to take charge of it. You have to take responsibility. You have to do something. You have to act. And action shouldn't come from force. It's not about control, but it's about empowerment. And you should think about, who am I when I take this action? Am I taking this action for my future self, or because I'm trying to force something? And so I really sat with myself and explored, what place am I taking this action from? And strangely, taking this action, taking my fertility into my own hands and choosing to do this made me feel very empowered. Choosing to freeze my eggs made me feel very empowered, and it actually enabled me to be in the belief that I can have a baby naturally, or I will have a baby naturally. It's also really good to get your fertility checked, by the way. If you want a baby, maybe go and do that first. If you want to be a mom, or if you're a man, also good to get your sperm checked. Just saying. But I still believe I'll have a baby naturally, but it's just something that takes the pressure off a little bit. Anyways, I was really grateful, and I can be really grateful for the work I do and the emotional awareness I have, the knowledge I have about the nervous system, the knowledge I have about my state of being and my identity and the tools and process I have to change and evolve all of that, because the journey towards freezing my eggs was hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This was tough. It was tough. I did not feel like myself for a solid 6 to 8 weeks. I still don't fully feel like myself. My hormones are still rebalancing. But I had a lot of side effects. But what I chose to do, and now we're kind of getting to the topic of the self-concept I held throughout and the embodiment I was in. Because I always say that your state of being will fluctuate throughout your day, but your core identity remains. And that became very much evident for me throughout this process because my body changed. I didn't feel good in my body. I was extremely bloated pretty much the whole time because your ovaries grow really, really big, and I was holding on to all this water weight. I was having extreme mood swings, really from completely depressed, which is something that I didn't have to deal with for years, to being high on life, to, being furious, and it was an emotional roller coaster. But I just used every experience I had, every state I was in to my advantage, really. For example, when I was really bloated, I would just imagine that I was already pregnant. I don't want to be pregnant right now. As I said, I'm not ready. This is partly why I froze my eggs, but I was kind of future pacing it a little bit. And I was just holding my belly and speaking to my ovaries like I would speak to a baby. And maybe that sounds a bit abstract and weird and strange, but it really helped me not see the bloating as something negative and uncomfortable, but seeing it as something that is for my future family, that is actually serving my desire. So maybe this is something that you can take as a lesson. Maybe there is something in your life that's not going to plan, that's not going the way you want it to go. You just choosing to see that from the perspective of where you're going to be in your future because you're going through this right now, that can be really helpful and can ensure that you're resisting what's happening a lot less. Now, I heard from other women who froze their eggs that they felt really lonely throughout this process, especially if they were going through it without a partner, but also if they were going through it with a partner, they would often feel lonely because men just don't understand. Just from the context from the perspective of, it's just a different body. It's different hormonal fluctuations. It's not an experience that a man will have. So I heard from a lot of women that they felt very lonely throughout this process. To be honest, I didn't. At least not more than normal. Of course, I had my moments where I felt lonely. Everyone feels lonely from time to time. And when you're pumping your body full of hormones, your emotions are definitely heightened. They're definitely amplified. But I didn't feel lonely because I felt like I'm doing this for my family. This is my future family. So I felt very connected to my future baby, my partner. I didn't feel like I'm alone in this, which was also a really powerful perspective shift. And every step really made me feel empowered, even the very difficult ones. And trust me, there were some very difficult ones. The mood swings were extremely challenging as well. And I'm very grateful that I'm trained and I'm skilled in regulating myself, both from a nervous system perspective, from a perspective of emotional regulation. And I also had a lot of support to reach out. I got to reach out for help to people and mentors. And I really want to emphasize this as well. You never need to go through anything alone. There is always someone who can support you. Don't punish yourself by feeling like you need to do everything alone. And I also felt like freezing my eggs was kind of a good mirror to what manifestation is like, because I don't know about you, but I often feel like holding a vision, holding the intention to manifest something is kind of like carrying an energetic pregnancy. It's something so sacred. It's like you're pregnant with something. It's just not a baby. It's a vision for your future. It's a desire. But it's also a pregnancy. And you know how many women, I think like we're losing that, that women feel like they can't talk about their pregnancy before they're at least 12 weeks, you know, but some women still really prefer to keep it a secret until they hit that 3-month mark, just because miscarriages are much more common before then. Although I feel like we need to talk about miscarriages a lot more too. Maybe I'm gonna like get someone on the podcast as well to talk about miscarriage. I think that would be a powerful topic too. But during those 12 weeks, if you choose not to talk about your pregnancy, you're keeping it a secret and you're holding it sacred, but you're still pregnant. And I think that's what manifestation is like as well. You're usually keeping it a secret, except for what you share with your coach or what you share with someone you really trust. But for the most part, it's like a sacred, energetic pregnancy that nobody knows about. And you're just holding that desire. You're holding that seed close to your heart. And I think that's really beautiful. And I felt like through freezing my eggs, through having this experience of my ovaries growing and going through these hormonal fluctuations, I almost got to embody that experience. And I was really carrying this energetic pregnancy. Like I wasn't pregnant, but I very much felt pregnant. I think, I mean, since I've never been pregnant, I can't really say, but I think there is some overlap considering how intense the hormonal fluctuations were and, you know, some of the symptoms I had. I was basically feeling pregnant, and at the same time, this was like a manifestation. This was like a seed of something that I am holding for my future, whether my future baby is going to come from one of these eggs that I froze or whether I'm gonna get pregnant naturally. I still planted a seed for my future through taking this action and navigating it the way I did. So that's so far why I did it, how I held myself throughout the process, how I approached this with faith and not fear. Now I want to talk about how I feel now, how I felt after in general, what the result was like, how that made me feel, and yeah, what my plan is now for the future, both from an energetic perspective, from the perspective of my identity, my self-concept, but then also from the perspective of where I believe my future is headed. So, as I said, the side effects have been really intense, and I'm still kind of regulating myself. My hormones are not completely balanced. They're not completely back to normal. It's still ongoing. And it took a really long time. It kind of annoyed me because a lot of clinics and places make it sound as if it's a 2-week process, because for 2 weeks you give yourself the injections, which by the way, you give yourself injections if you weren't aware of that. So that's a whole thing too, although that was the easiest part. But they often make it sound like that period where you give yourself the injections, those 2 weeks, like it's just 2 weeks and then you have the retrieval and everything is fine again. But really, there were a few weeks before, and then there was that period of the injections, there was the surgery itself, and then there was the recovery from the surgery, and that really took and is still taking a really long time. So to get my hormones to regulate, I did a lot for my body. I did acupuncture, I really watched my diet, my lifestyle. And I'm telling you this because your physical state really impacts your emotional state. It really impacts how you feel within yourself, how you feel about yourself, how you feel about your reality. It impacts your self-concept. It impacts your well-being. There is no changing your self-concept without working on the nervous system and working on your habitual state of being, working on your emotional integration and taking care of your physical body. This is so often neglected, right? Sometimes we feel like crap because we just didn't sleep enough, or we didn't eat properly, or we're not hydrated, which, by the way, I'm not hydrated. I just keep talking and talking and talking, and I need some water desperately. But when your physical body is not doing well, your self-concept can't be doing well. Your state of being can't be doing well. And so it really emphasized that for me again, because the recovery was so intense on my body, and I did a lot of things to support myself, and I'm very grateful I did that. And again, I'm very grateful to have the skills and the process and the training to support myself emotionally. I'm very grateful I have mentors and coaches and people to support me and friends who can support me. But yeah, that's very important that you take care of your physical body, not just in the sense of egg freezing, but in order to take care of your state of being. It's not just the mind, and your physical body is just as, if not more important, because it serves as the basis, right? We only got this one body in this life, and let's take care of it, okay? Now, there was also a huge component. How do I put this? Well, just after the surgery, just after the retrieval, they tell you how many eggs were retrieved. Now, I'm not going to share the number with you because I don't feel like it serves anyone to know the number. It's just something that's, that you hear maybe because you're nosy, but I don't want anyone who maybe wants to go through this process or who did go through this process to compare themselves. So I'm not going to share the number, but what I will share is that it is not what I wanted. I was very disappointed. I had a big cry on the day. I had pretty high expectations, to be honest, because it looked pretty good. And then in all the tests leading up to it, and then I just didn't get what I wanted, And at the time, I was just really disappointed, and I was really sad, and I really had to work through these emotions. But now in hindsight, I'm actually grateful because it was and is an opportunity for me to trust. To trust in my future. It was the outcome that I didn't want, but that I needed in order to deepen my trust, because this was never about control. This was never about having a definitive certainty that I was going to be a mom. That is a vision that I need to hold, that I can't control. That is just something where I need to trust in the unseen. I just need to trust in the future that has not happened yet. I just need to trust that it's going to. And I never took this action in order to get certainty. To be honest, even if I had gotten a number that would have made me feel safe, that I had wanted, I still wouldn't have felt completely safe and certain, because there is no number that can give you complete certainty. There is always a chance that it won't work. So maybe it's a good thing in that sense too, but I always decided I was only going to do this from a place of faith. I was never going to do this from a place of fear. I wanted the action to freeze my eggs to be aligned with who I am being and who I am becoming. And I didn't want it to be fear-based. And so it was an action that helped me change my attitude towards my future. It wasn't an action that I did to force or control anything. I took charge, and I could do it again if I really wanted, right? In theory. Now, if I really wanted more certainty, although it would be another investment, monetary investment, and another huge toll on my body, I could in theory do it again if I wanted to. But I sat with it and I realized I don't want to. This was a lot on my body. As I said, my body is precious to me. It's my temple. I want to take good care of it. This is Elsa, by the way, if you don't know her. If you're watching this on video, if you're listening just audio, then you won't see her, but maybe you want to watch the video so you see the cute little baby. I'm already a mother because she's my baby. You will see her a lot, and she might make some noise sometimes as well. Right, baby? Yes. Do you want a kiss? Slightly distracted. So the reason I'm not doing it again, although I could, was, yes, because it was a huge toll on my body, but also if I did a second round, that decision currently would come from fear and not from trust. It would come from me trying to control how I'm going to be a mom. It would come from me not trusting the process. And I wanted to speak to this as well because some people might be listening to this and might think, well, you believe you create your reality. You believe that your state of being, your identity shapes what your external experience can be. And you believe that you can manifest your reality. So why would you take this action in order to force or control something? Why would you not just do it internally and just trust that you're going to get what you want? Now, I want to refer back to what I said in the beginning. If we're just waiting around for something to happen, we're going to wait forever. So I'm a firm believer in taking action to get what you want, provided it doesn't come from force or from fear, and it doesn't come from like a misaligned identity. And this is an example in both directions, where I took the action because it was aligned with the future I wanted. It didn't come from force. It came from something that felt right, that kind of helped me in my embodiment, helped me to step further into the embodiment of becoming a mother. It helped me feel more secure. It helped me see how my body reacts to a huge influx of hormones, which happens in pregnancy also. But then I also got to experience what it would be like to take this action again, but from a misaligned place. And so I chose not to do it because a second round at this point in time would come from fear and not from faith, not from trust. But where I am right now, I am actually really excited for the future. I do feel like it helped release pressure around the timeline. I don't feel urgency around becoming a mom, around getting pregnant. Although I don't have certainty, I feel a lot more trusting. I feel a lot more at ease with where I am in my life. And I'm excited for what's to come, honestly. And I'm excited for that day when I will be ready to be a mom. But I also know that day is not today. And I'm really at peace with not knowing when that day will be that I'll be ready, and when that day will be that it's actually going to happen. And yeah, that's where I am right now. So I hope you enjoyed hearing about this. It's a bit of a different story. It's a bit of, it's not something that I share on my YouTube or other platforms in this form. So I hope this gave you a bit of a different insight if you have been following me on other platforms. If you haven't, or just anyway, thank you so much for tuning in to Identity Evolution. And if today's episode moved you, or it inspired you, or it stirred something up in you, then please make sure to hit subscribe. Leave a review and a rating. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts and a rating, and you can also leave ratings on Spotify now. So please give a little review. It really benefits the podcast. It helps it to be seen and found by people in the future, and maybe share it with someone who's on their own reinvention journey, or who wants to become a mom, or who's considering freezing their eggs. And you can also download my free self-concept mastery blueprint, which I have linked in the show notes. It's just a little freebie for you to get started on your journey of evolving your self-concept. You get an insight into my approach to doing this, and you also get a daily checklist so that you can have some tangible ways to apply, shifting your self-concept so that you can see some changes in your life. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next episode. So this is your rebirth into the version of you that's been waiting for you to step into her. And I'll see you next time.